Greetings. Son of Liberty 2020. Even less preparation, even more just I am sitting at the tavern and you've joined me. You're saying, what's going on? Or whatever they would have said in 1763. And I respond to you by saying, I've been thinking about the degradation and the decay, the moral rot of our society. But as always with this, not particularly chasing or going into the particulars. It is more to pull back and think about, what do you value? Do your values drive you? How do you use your minds and your brains and your understanding to make sure you're not being snowed, that you're not being played, that they're not fooling you, whoever they might be, politicians, media, whoever. I think back to the resistance. The reason I thought back to the resistance is that in my mind I had gotten to the realization or to the thought through process that we are at a stage where we have been put in a position of being the resistance. It began with COVID. Of course, it didn't begin with the disease. It began with governmental restrictions, shutdowns, outright fabrications and lies. 15 days to flatten the curve. The United States, 3 years later, still is not lifting the COVID emergency. They have swept in, they have taken away freedom of movement, freedom of assembly. They have taken away freedom of expression in many ways, which is not just specifically COVID, but it is what is coming out about government pressuring the big tech social media companies to censor. Pursue that information for yourself because you need to do that. Get educated about what government did and how it has been doing it. The only reason you'll get educated now is because Twitter was bought by someone who's saying, here are the files, and because enough districts switched to where Republicans gained the majority in the House of Representatives, and Republicans are asking some serious questions and doing some serious reviews. So imagine, though, thinking of using that thought, that we are now in the position of being occupied and oppressed. Let me set it up. But let me get you back into all the disruption of my mind. Well, my mind and this disruption comes from history. The occupiers, those who oppressed, who came in and stripped of rights, freedoms, liberties, demanded fealty to their ideas, to their way of being. La Résistance is what it became known in France. It was not that in 1940. You know why it wasn't that? Do you know why France basically collapsed in 6 weeks once the Nazis finally invaded? Do you wonder why France declared war in September 3rd, 1939 against Nazi Germany, when Nazi Germany had attacked Poland, the east, and France is on the west? Nazi Germany had 80 to 90% of its forces in the east. France had the largest army in Europe, or had been the largest army in Europe, could have attacked at that point. They didn't. The history is fascinating. It's also difficult. It's also detailed. Here's a very, very broad overview. Is the French did not attack the enemy. They did not engage. They declared war with no intention of waging war. Why? That speaks to a rot in France. People who did not want to fight, wanted to be left alone, did not believe what they had been told. There's a whole history to that, partly because there had been so much in World War I that led to World War I, and then in World War I that was based on these beliefs that led to unbelievable slaughter of men, soldiers. 1 out of every 4 Frenchmen between 18 and 25, I think it was, died, was killed in the war. For what? The French people ask themselves, for what? For Alsace and Lotharingen, 2 provinces? We had been built up, stoked for this, and it cost us all this. This price was too much to pay. This was too much to pay. So the French, I'm being very simplistic, this is not a history lesson, said, we're not going to fall for the propaganda anymore. We're not going to fall for the patriotism. We're not going to fall for that anymore. We don't want to fight anymore. We want to be left alone. We want to be left alone to live. Well, the Nazis were not interested in leaving them alone. The Nazis came in, took over, and there you go. It was only after France had collapsed, it was only after many, minority, but still many, collaborated, accepted, this is the New World Order. It was only after many lived, okay, we'll just continue to live our lives, until they experienced enough. That the Nazis were not, they weren't letting them live their lives. The Nazis were based in racism of Aryan superiority, and everyone else, which easily was recognized as the Jews and the Gypsies and black people, but was within minutes, was Slavs. Poles were looked on as subhuman. The only people who were good enough were those who they decided were good enough. Did your hackles just go up with that? They should have. You don't get to decide who's good enough. And you can't decide it based on race or skin or color or culture, nothing. So the French, through the pressure of living under the occupation, more and more French people recognized who they actually were. Because the French, we're rooted out of England, because I'm an American, I'm speaking as American, we're rooted out of England and Britain, the UK. That's our roots. But we are kindred spirits, siblings with France and the French in freedoms, liberties. All men are created equal, came from the United States. Oh my goodness, from the French. 1789, Declarations of Rights of Man, is a foundational document in world history that came from France. It took the French being pressed, being suppressed, being oppressed for Frenchmen, which is, forget it, I mean, it's French people, to recognize that they had accepted tyranny. And they decided, many of them on an individual basis, that their liberty, that their freedoms was worth the risk of resisting. We're in that place now. We are not under the same oppression of Nazism, but we are under the same oppression that we have so many Americans and those in the West. Again, call you out, UK and Australia, Canada. Where are you all? New Zealand, y'all are a lost cause. If you don't put Ardern under arrest, don't even put her under arrest. Of course, I'm not saying that. Until we recognize that we demand our rights, liberties, and freedoms, and we demand that these cultural elites, cultural leaders, political leaders submit to us, then we are in a bad place. Then they have power. This is no ending. This is no conclusion. This is just a thought. We're now in the position of being the resistance because they've seized power in many ways. They've seized control. And there are many blinded to it. Son of Liberty 2020, amliberty2020@gmail.com, thelibertyhub.com. Consider what it will take for the large majority of Americans to recognize that our safety is not as important as our liberty, and that those who are imposing restrictions but don't apply it to themselves, that's just one signal, are the ones we need to take out of office or power. Till next time.